毛泽东1893年12月26号出生于湖南湘潭富裕的农村家庭，从小受良好教育，并在求学时期加入共产党。1934年遭到国民党蒋介石的追剿，展开长征，带领红军退居山西延安。日军侵略与2次大战接踵而来。1949年初，在毛泽东的领导下，解放军频频战胜国民党军队，取得内战的决定性胜利，国民政府退守台湾。而毛泽东在当年10月1号创建了中华人民共和国，领导政权近30年，直到1976年过世于北京，享年83岁。
我想，就是因为毛泽东建立了这么样一个体制，为了这个体制的继续统治的合法性呢，他们到现在也不敢这个抛弃毛泽东这个负资产。所以导致就是毛泽东的基因仍然存在于这个体制之中。
而在国际间，由于冷战政策与意识形态相左，与坚定盟友前苏联决裂，1972年与美国交好，促成尼克森总统2月的破冰之旅。毛泽东是中国建政后的首任国家主席，为了巩固政权，发动大跃进与文化大革命等政治运动，造成数千万人死伤。在他120岁冥诞这一天，评价仍褒贬不一。UDN TV 陈美文编译。
大家好，欢迎收看今天的全球瞭望，我是郭崇伦。毛泽东的评价在中国大陆一直是非常争议的问题，那也很少有中国大陆外面的学者对于毛泽东有一个很公允的评价。事实上，有非常多的书都已经写过了，但是最近由潘佐夫教授所写的《毛泽东传》却受到非常大的注意，主要他是使用了俄罗斯的档案。这个方面，我们今天特别要访问潘佐夫教授。Welcome, Professor Panzov, to be on our show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's my great pleasure to be here.
First of all, I want to ask you, how do you begin your project of writing Mao the true story? I understand you have done a great deal of research before on China Revolution and China relations with Russia and so on and so forth. What enticed you to try to write a book on Mao?
Thank you for the question. Here is the story. I have done lots of research in the Russian archives since 1990, since Gorbachev glasnost, when he began to open archives. I got an access to the archives. This is a unique source of information. This is the most important, the biggest depository of documents on the world communist movement. That preserves 1.5 million written documents, lots of photographic and materials, films, and so on. But it's been always closed. But in 1990, I got an access. It was a year before communism collapsed in Russia. And I got an access to practically everything. And then I began to publish books based on the archives, and one of the first books came out in the United States. It was Bolsheviks and the Chinese Revolution, based on archives, and I continued to do my research in the archives on many issues connected with the Chinese Revolutionary movement. But I never thought about Mao Zedong biography. But the Russian publisher, Молодая Гвардия, a very famous and the oldest publishing house in Russia, offered me to write a book about Mao. So I was very honored, because of course for a sinologist it's a great chance. It's a very important project. And in particular, I was happy because, as a matter of fact, my grandfather, whose name is George Ehrenburg, he was the first who wrote a short biography of Mao Zedong. It was in the early 30s, And he wrote a short biography in the Russian journal. It was a few years before Edgar Snow wrote the book Red Star of China. And so for me, it was like, you know, a very important project because my grandfather started researching Mao Zedong, and I was honored to write a big book about Mao. And I began to write this book and finished the book in 2006. And it came out in 2007 in Russia. Since then,
the first in Russian edition?
The first it was in Russian edition. I published it in Russia. And since then I continued to study Mao because new materials appeared, so I used them and I expanded the book. And finally, the book became, I mean, the manuscript, the final manuscript became very huge, about 1,300 pages. Oh. And at that time, a friend of mine, Professor Stephen Levin, I've known the guy for many years. He visited me, and I gave him my Russian book as a gift. And Stephen Levin knows Russian, and he looked at the book and said, "Oh, I like it, and I will translate it." At that time, I already began to study Deng Xiaoping, and so I had no time to translate the book. So I said, "Steve, but it's a huge book." And he said, "No, I like it, I will translate it." And he did all translating. At that time, I was writing Deng Xiaoping biography, and then we along with our literary agent, we began to search for a publisher, and Simon & Schuster expressed great interest in the book, but Simon & Schuster asked to cut it.
It's too long.
It's too long. And so Steve did the cutting.
Okay.
So finally we published the book in 2012. And I used all the most recent documents, you know, incorporated into this book. And then, you know, the Taiwanese publisher, LinkedIn, approached us, and so here we are. We published the book in Chinese. So at the same time, I finished Deng Xiaoping book, and again, Steve expressed his willingness to translate, and he translated the book. At that time, I already began to write a new biography. This time on Chiang Kai-shek. So that's what I'm doing now, but I'm just in the beginning, so I cannot say that I'm specialist on Chiang Kai-shek because I just began to write.
We'll talk about the new project later, but let me ask you about Mao's biography. Of course, you have done some review of the previous biography. What make you think your book stand out from the rest of the before studies? Yeah,
of course, you know, if I were satisfied with all other biographies of Mao, I would probably never write my own book, of course. But very few differences between my book and previous biographies that I all respect very much. But the first I mean, striking difference is that nobody else ever used the Russian archives.
Right.
And this is very important because not so many people know that in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, the Chinese communists had always prepared documents, most important political documents, and even in the 20s, even minor documents, in a few copies. One copy would go to the archives of the Communist Party. The second copy would be used to make copies for a local organization. But the third copy would go to Moscow.
Okay.
We will never understand the history of the Chinese Communist Party if we miss the fact that the Chinese Communist Party was a section of the Communist International.
Right.
And the Chinese Communist Party was highly dependent upon the Comintern in Moscow and the Bolshevik political bureau that actually was like the headquarters of the world revolution, and sent directives to all communists, including the Chinese communists. The Chinese communists depended upon the Soviet Union in the 1920s, early 30s. The Communist Party depended financially 100%. The Comintern even paid monthly salary to Chen Duxiu, Mao Zedong, and other communists. So they didn't have their own income. Only when Mao and other communists in the rural areas began to attack the rich and began to rob them and take money and so on, they found the second source. But the communists still continued to subsidize, the communist movement in China. And even in 1941, when the Nazis attacked the Soviet Union, Stalin sent $1 million to Mao Zedong, in aid. And so I have lots of financial receipts in the Comintern and stuff like this. So this is absolutely true. And since the Comintern controlled finances, the Comintern control in the 20s and the 30s controlled the personal rotation in the Communist Party. And actually, it was the Comintern who started to launch the cult of Mao Zedong. It started in Moscow, not in China. And Stalin promoted, Mao Zedong and helped him to get power.
Okay.
And so this is a very important source of information that's been always kept in secret.
Right.
And when I came to the archives in 1990, I came to the director of the archive. It was a new person. Communists began to collapse. And I asked about the files of the Chinese Communist Party, including personal files of the Chinese communists, because when a foreigner, not only Chinese, any foreigner, crossed the border of Russia, KGB and the Comintern at that time immediately began to collect information, sensitive information sometimes. And so these collections, private files, nobody ever had an access. So, and I was the first to get an access to all these files. I was interested in Chinese communists, of course, so, and I found over 3,328 personal files, including Deng Xiaoping, Mao Zedong, and Zhou Enlai, and Chen Yun, and Chen Yi, and Zhu De, many, many, many. And Lin Biao file is very interesting. And among other things, I found 15 volumes of personal file of Mao Zedong. So I was the first to use it, and that, of course, very important. The second issue, I was not satisfied with many other books on Mao Zedong, because from my point of view, some of them, most of them were not objective. So some people praised Mao, some people denounced Mao, like Yun Zhan and John Holliday, for example, with his book Mao, Unknown Story. I don't think it's a scientific research. I mean, it's more like...
Let me ask you, they also claim they are using Russian file. But you don't agree with the presentation?
I mean, here's the story. I know John Holliday, and I helped him in the archives.
Okay.
Yeah. And he visited me when they were writing the book. He visited me a few times. And we talk about Mao, about communist movement and stuff like this, and we talk about the archives. But, since 1990, until 1993, for 3 years, before I left Russia for the United States, I worked in the Russian archives 5 days a week. Since early morning until late night. John made a few trips to Moscow and visited the archives just for a few days. So that's the difference. He could pick up some information, but they didn't have they couldn't have access to all these documents. When I left Russia and settled down in the United States, I still go back to Russia twice a year and spend all my vacations and holidays in Russia. And again, I go back to the archives, and I establish very good relations with the archive members of the staff. So like in China, in Russia, everything is based on Guanxi. So they show me documents that very interesting and yeah.
Let me ask you another book. Yeah. It's a memoir done by Mao's personal physician, Li Zhisui. What do you think about his account of Mao?
Yeah, I respect him very much. And I use the book, of course, but you know, it's not only about his memoir, it's about all memoirs in the world. You know, people are very subjective, and if I write my memoirs, I also, you know, write a subjective book, you see, because it will be my memoirs, so I view these things like, you know, in this light you would view the same thing in different light. And sometimes people believe that they remember, but they do not remember and stuff like this. So you must be very critical in regard to all memoirs, but sometimes we can check and compare memoirs with archival or original printed documents, and then we can trust 100%. Sometimes we cannot, and it's up to the researcher, you know, it depends. It's a very sensitive thing, you know, sometimes you can trust, sometimes you think it's not, it cannot be correct. For example, I can tell you a story. Lindsay Xu in his book writes that when Deng Xiaoping broke his hip while playing billiard, Mao Zedong asked Lindsay Xu to visit Deng Xiaoping in the hospital, and Lindsay Xu visited him, and then in his memoir he wrote that while at hospital, Deng Xiaoping courted a nurse, and they had a romance. Deng Xiaoping and the nurse at the hospital, and the nurse even got pregnant and finally fired. The question, can we trust it? I don't know, because who knows? Actually, in my Deng Xiaoping book, I mentioned this fact, but I said it's very strange, because before he broke his hip, Deng Xiaoping never was a womanizer. You see?
And he was constantly under surveillance. I mean,
you know, that's strange. But why did he begin to curse this? I mean, curse this woman after he broke his hip? It's very strange. You see, but
we're going to take a short break, and after that, we'll go to the main theme of your book.
Okay.
我们等一下再继续回来访问潘总副教授。
率领文武百官向毛泽东铜像鞠躬。2013年12月26号是大陆前领导人毛泽东120岁冥诞，大陆官方举行纪念活动以及座谈会，对毛泽东的历史功绩再度作出评价。
习近平指出，对历史人物的评价应该放在其所处时代和社会的历史条件下去分析，不能把历史顺境中的成功简单归功于个人。
习近平认为，革命领袖是人，不是神，既维护毛泽东的历史定位，也提到毛泽东发动文革的错误，还举明末起义的李自成为例，一旦贪污腐败，就算是功臣一样杀无赦，似乎在暗示他打击高官贪腐的决心。除了官方举行纪念，民间也以不同的方式纪念毛泽东。
说起毛主席，我们都知道他是创建了新中国的一代伟人。虽然你每天都接触他，但你究竟了解他多少呢？
生动的动画介绍毛泽东生平，也不可避免地提到国共相争的历史。被视为中共革命根据地的井冈山也有一系列活动，不少大陆民众回到旧地，感受当年的岁月。 毛泽东的评价褒贬不一，大陆官方曾经以3分有过、7分有功的3七开定调毛泽东历史功绩，而这一次为了巩固一党专政，看来大陆还是会继续扛着毛泽东的神主牌。
我们继续回来访问《毛泽东传》的作者潘佐夫教授。Professor Panzov, in your research, there's in the archive that the Communist International is play a major part in the CCP and on influencing Mao. But what we have seen in other accounts, it's always said that Mao is fighting with the wrong direction of the Comintern and is fighting with the representative of the Comintern all the time.
Allegedly backed by the Comintern, like Ramin, Bogu.
Right. And in the end, Mao will win out. And the independent nationalist movement of Mao Zedong have won out. But you doesn't seem to.
No, I disagree. I disagree. And you remember, you asked me why did I think that my book is better than other books? Because when I came to work in the archives, I had the same impression. Because of course, all of us we read Stuart Schramm and Robert North and Benjamin Schwartz and many other specialists on Mao Zedong, and we always believed in this theory, but the archives do not prove it.
Okay.
The problem is that the Mao Zedong biographers before, they never took into account that in the Comintern there was the intra-party struggle. Okay. We have factions in the Comintern, even in the leadership of the Comintern. And every faction in the Comintern, they promoted their own Ganbu, Chinese leaders. And there was a faction rallied around a very important figure. His name was Pavel Mif. Mifu. They promoted Wang Min, Bogu, and other students, their own students who graduated from Zhongshan Daxi, Moscow Zhongshan Daxi. But there were some other groups in the Comintern who promoted different people, like Zhou Enlai, Xiang Yin, Zhang Guohao, okay? And another group that Stalin began to support promoted grouse-rooted, communists like Mao Zedong, who achieved some successes in the guerrilla warfare, and Stalin began to promote this group to balance, the power in the Communist Party. It was pure Machiavellian concept to, balance between factions and make all the factions appeal to Stalin. Stalin did
not... It's kind of divide and rule.
Divide and rule, exactly right. And Stalin, to be true, Stalin did not promote Wang Min, okay? And he was quite suspicious of Wang Min. And there are many documents that prove that Stalin sometimes did not trust him, sometimes trusted Wang Min, sometimes didn't trust him. But Stalin didn't trust anyone, including his own, in his circle. So, and that's why he began to promote Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong, what I found the most interesting in the archives, until the death of Stalin in March 1953, Mao Zedong had considered Stalin as his teacher. And he had been always extremely loyal to Stalin, you see. And he even sent him letters requesting directives. I'll tell you an interesting story. Before the Chinese communists seized power in 1949 and mainland China fell under communist dictatorship, Mao Zedong sent a secret message to Stalin asking him, where should we set up a capital of China? In Nanjing or in Beijing? And I found Stalin's reply, in Beijing. Here we are. We have a capital of China in Beijing. I don't want to say that it's just because Stalin decided, but I want to say that Mao consulted with Stalin, even about minor things. You see, the problem with New Democracy, 新民主主义, the problem of New Democracy is also very interesting because many people like Benjamin Schwartz and Robert North and Stuart Schramm and many people who ever studied Mao Zedong focused. Here we are. This is a different concept, different from Stalin. So Mao is original and Mao is more nationalist rather than communist. This is absolutely untrue because 新民主主义 I mean, the theory of New Democracy, the idea came from Moscow. In 1937, in November 1937, Stalin met with the delegation of the Chinese Communist Party to the Comintern, headed by Wang Min and Kan Shen, and Wang Zhexian was there also. And Stalin gave them an idea to abandon the fighting for socialism and to pretend that the Chinese Communist Party is no longer fighting for socialism in order to be able to unite the broad masses around the Communist Party as a nationalist force, because he always believed about the post-war, struggle for power and stuff like this. So it was Stalin's idea. And if you look not only on the Chinese Communist Party, but on all communist parties around the globe, with the beginning of World War II, all communist parties around the globe, they abandoned the idea of socialism and accepted people's democracy. Vietnam, Yugoslavia, Poland, Czechoslovakia, everybody accepted. So that was directed from Moscow. And Mao Zedong, when they began to defeat Chiang Kai-shek during the final civil war, Mao Zedong many times, we have correspondence between Stalin, he many times asked Stalin, please, Comrade Stalin, let me just abandon New Democracy, and we will win, you see. And Stalin always pointed out, no, it's not time yet, it's not time yet, you see.
Let me ask you then, what kind of impact is Stalin's death had on Mao, especially later on Khrushchev criticism on Stalin? What kind of impact would that have on Mao and the Communist Party of China, CCP as a whole?
Yeah. When Stalin died, Mao's first reaction, according to, again, some memoirs, he was in grief. And when he visited the Russian embassy, he even wept. But you know that before Mao died, before Stalin died, Mao visited Stalin in Moscow, and Stalin treated Mao very badly, and Mao had very mixed feelings about Stalin, but Mao respected force. And Stalin was the leader and the teacher, and he respected him as the great Marxist-Leninist, so for him it was a great sorrow. But when Khrushchev denounced Stalin in 1956, Mao's first reaction was positive. Not negative, as many people believe, but the first reaction was positive, because Khrushchev, with his report, emancipated Mao psychologically. Mao used to believe in Stalin's concept of the socialist construction. And since Stalin was an authority in the world communist movement, Mao never dared to question the principles. And right after the death of Stalin, he abandoned New Democracy in July, August at the Economic Financial Conference, and they began to build socialism along the Soviet lines. The first 5-year plan was set up according to the Soviet blueprint. But in 1956, for the first time, Mao realized he could try something else. He's never longer, under Stalin's influence. So his first reaction was positive. And we have many documents and many memoirs, about the discussion. There were several meetings of the Political Bureau and the Secretariat, secret meetings, when they discussed the text of Khrushchev's speech. They actually did not receive the text from the Soviets. It's very interesting. They translated from English. When Americans published the text, because Khrushchev made it a big secret. I mean, he sent just his people to inform the delegation, Chinese delegation to the 20th Congress, headed by Zhu Dei and Deng Xiaoping, but this person just read the document, and Shi Zhe, the translator, translated orally, but they never gave the text. Never gave the text. Oh, okay. And so Deng Xiaoping, when he got back to Beijing, Zhu Dei stayed in Moscow for some time, but Deng Xiaoping arrived. Immediately he came to Zhongnanhai, to Mao, and informed orally. They didn't have a text. But later, New York Times published the whole text that the Americans got from Poland, okay, that somehow that was smuggled to Poland. And they translate, and the Chinese did translations from English. And then they discuss it. And here Mao expressed some grievances for the first time. He talked about Stalin, and his Stalin's bad treatment of Mao Zedong during his visit. He said, for the first time, I will share with you what I had kept in my heart for a long time. Anyway, so the first reaction was positive. But he changed the reaction in the fall of 1956 due to the Polish and Hungarian events. When Poles and Hungarians revolted against communism and against the Soviets' rule, Mao got scared. And he put the whole blame for this chaos in the socialist camp in Europe on Khrushchev's shoulders. Before that, he already lost confidence in Khrushchev. Okay, and since 1954, that's another difference with many books about Mao and Khrushchev. I mean, the difference in my book. I assert here in the book that Mao began to Mao did not totally trust Khrushchev and considered him like he called him Hunchun. In 1954, you see, when Khrushchev visited Mao Zedong, Khrushchev came to visit Mao at the end of September 1954 to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. And he was very excited to go to China. But it was a great mistake that Khrushchev made, because that was the first summit between Mao and Khrushchev. And Khrushchev, if he really wanted to be the leader, he was supposed to stay in Moscow and wait until Mao Zedong arrived. You see what I mean? But he was so excited to see China, because Stalin never let Khrushchev and nobody except Molotov and Mikoyan traveled, okay? And Khrushchev, we know from his memoirs, that was his dream, to see the world. And when he became the leader and he got a chance to visit China, he was so excited. He was a very bad diplomat. And when he came to China, he was a guest. Mao was the host. And when Khrushchev got out of the plane, he made the second mistake. He got out of the plane, Mao was at the airfield, okay, and Khrushchev came to Mao, embraced him and kissed him in public. You know, all Chinese, they were shocked, you see. And then Khrushchev gave lots of gifts to Mao, okay, and promises. They even talked about nuclear weapons and stuff like this. And Mao, according to Jiang Xin memoir, okay, after every meeting in 1954, when Mao got back home, he had only one word, stupid, you see, idiot, okay, shagwa, you see what I mean. So, and since then he began to treat Khrushchev very badly, you see. In all his meetings, Mao showed arrogance. You see, Mao was a smoker, for example, and Khrushchev did not tolerate, take smoke. But Mao began to smoke straight to his face. You see. And then all these famous, swimming pool negotiations, when he invited Khrushchev to swim in the swimming pool, and Khrushchev could not swim and was like this, and Mao was like an Olympian champion. Finally, Khrushchev lost his nerve and finally realized that Mao treated him badly. And this personal relationship had a tremendous negative impact on the Sino-Soviet relations.
But isn't it also true that this criticism on Stalin, especially on his personal cult, is it also reflect on some of the resentment that is happening in CCP regarding Mao Zedong at that time? If it can happen in our model Soviet Union, it can also happen in China.
I understand. I wouldn't say that there was resentment in the party, but it had a very important, again, psychological impact of Mao Zedong.
Okay.
In 1956, when they began to discuss Khrushchev's report, and later, Mao Zedong became extremely suspicious of many members of his own party leadership.
Right.
That was very important, you see, because if Khrushchev, who had always been very close to Mao, after very close to Stalin, after Stalin's death, immediately denounced Stalin, Mao began to think about Zhou Enlai, Liu Shaoqi, Deng Xiaoping, Zhu Di, and others. Who would be China's Khrushchev after Mao's death? That had a tremendous impact.
And this had become a term of negative.
Exactly.
Who is China's Khrushchev?
In May 1966, Mao wrote it in the resolution, that actually stirred up the flame of the Cultural Revolution against China's Khrushchev. Exactly, because Mao was obsessed with this idea. You see, I even see the picture. You see, I mean, imaginary pictures. It's how they talk to Mao, and Mao listen and think, who is going to betray me? That's of course that had an impact.
We're going to take another short break, and then we're coming back to continue discussion. 我们等一下回来继续跟潘佐夫教授来做访谈。我们继续跟潘佐夫教授来做访谈。Professor Panzov, understand that your newest project will be on the biography on Deng Xiaoping, which is going to publish in Chinese edition pretty soon. Could you care to talk about what kind of theme you have in the book, and what make your book different from other Deng Xiaoping's book, including the one by his own daughter?
Deng Xiaoping book also first was published in Russia in 2012, and Stephen Levin also translated Deng Xiaoping book, and it came out this year, in March this year, with Oxford University Press in the United States and Great Britain, and Linzing Publishing Company already accepted the book to be translated. They began translating. Probably, hopefully, it will come out next year.
Okay.
And what's the major difference? I respect Professor Vogel, and we have very good friendly relations with Professor Vogel. And we negotiated, we consulted with each other and exchanged documents when he was writing his book and I was writing my book. But I think...
Two of you almost starting and the project at the same time.
Not exactly, because I began to write my book later.
Okay.
I mean, at the time when Ezra Vogel almost finished the book.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's why his book came out earlier than mine. But
his book actually is been sanctioned. I mean, it's been not approved, but by Beijing. It's like English version of Chinese approved version of it. Right.
I know. What's the major difference? First, Ezra Vogel, from my opinion, with all due respect, did not write a biography of Deng Xiaoping. This is a biography of Deng Xiaoping's reforms.
Right.
And he just dedicated a few pages to Deng Xiaoping's life in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. You know, he actually started a book with the reforms. And it's a great study, very meticulous, lots of documents, but it's a study of the reforms. It's not a biography of Deng Xiaoping.
Right.
My book on Deng Xiaoping is the full biography, you know, from the very beginning up to the end. Second, I don't think that Ezra Vogel's book is balanced and objective. Ezra Vogel is very impressed with the economic growth of China and with the result of the economic reforms, and he credited Deng Xiaoping as the father of the economic reforms, and he paid less attention to Deng Xiaoping crimes. But Deng Xiaoping was a very contradictory figure. And like Mao Zedong, he's responsible for the death of millions. And in the early 50s, during the agrarian reform, okay, when he was the boss of the Southwest, okay, he was in particular vicious. And even Mao Zedong had to intervene, and he sent messages to Deng Xiaoping talking that it was not permissible to kill so many people. So when Mao Zedong sent this message, Deng Xiaoping immediately said, okay, and they, you know, reduced the number of people arrested and killed. In the end of the 50s, he was responsible for the campaign against intelligentsia, you see. 500,000 were imprisoned. And during the Cultural Revolution, in spite of the fact that he suffered, but he slavishly served Mao Zedong, and we have all the letters he wrote to Mao and Wang Dongxin, begging Mao, forgive him, in spite of the fact that Deng Pufang, his son, broke his spine, and his wife suffered a lot with blood pressure and stuff like this. But what's the major difference in my book? I claim, I assert in the book, that until 1976, Deng Xiaoping had served Mao slavishly, you see. And it's not astonishing that Mao actually considered Deng Xiaoping his best disciple. But Mao was a very difficult man, you see, and the major mistakes that Deng Xiaoping sometimes made, okay, it's not because he you know, tried to follow a different way, like many people believe that he was moderate and he, you know, was shocked with the Great Leap Forward and tried to oppose Mao in 1960s with these cats, you know, yellow and black cats and stuff like that. No, he did not oppose Mao. At the time when he came up with his cats, you know, yellow, white cats, it doesn't matter what color of the cat. He, at that time, in 1962, he believed that Mao wanted them, Liu Shaoqi, Chen Yu, Deng Xiaoping, wanted to do something to overcome the crisis. Mao left Beijing and said to them, okay, you know what to do, do it. You see, and then all of them, Chen Yu and Liu Shaoqi, they said, let's support the peasants because they divided the land. That's it. When Mao got back from Hangzhou and said, this is wrong, Deng Xiaoping immediately said, yeah, sorry. And he called Hu Yaoban, who was the leader of the Communist Youth League, and said, delete the cats from the stenographic records of the meeting. So only in 1976 he began to come up with his reforms. His modernization plan in 1973, he began to do it only because Mao wanted it, you see. Right. So anyway, Deng Xiaoping himself said before he died that if he evaluated his life, you see, merits and demerits, it will be 50-50.
Let me ask you about your assessment of Mao. Now that the Communist Central had made official 70 merits.
70-30. Yeah, you see, at best, I would say vice versa.
Vice versa.
Yeah, so 70 bad, 30 good. But it still is not exact because Mao was responsible for the death of millions.
Right.
And even in comparison with Hitler and Stalin, much more people died in China, you see, than under Hitler and Stalin. Of course, most victims were victims of the Great Famine, you see, but still, the famine was caused by, mistakes made by Mao Zedong. So how can we calculate? You see what I mean? Even one person, if one person died, that's the great tragedy in the world, you see. So to calculate in percentages, it wouldn't be correct, you see.
I want to thank you very much, Professor Pansov,
thank you so
sharing
thank you.
Your insight.
Thank you for inviting me.
美国联准会主席耶伦15号出席众议院金融服务委员会听证会，再度讲明白，美国经济不会受到国外市场太多影响，今年可能会进行美国2006年以来的首度升息。许多投资者预计，联准会将于9月的政策会议上首次加息。不过，耶伦表示，他更倾向于早生缓进的方式，让升息循环更灵活。听证会上，耶伦还因为2012年联准会货币政策讯息泄露案，加上不配合调查，被议员炮火洗礼。长期以来，众议院不断要求联准会增加透明度和审问机制，而耶伦也再次强调，联准会的季度新闻发布会和经济数据预测都在朝着方向改进。而对于提交2012年泄露案的资料，耶伦则表示愿意配合，但现在还不是时候。
今天谢谢您的收看，我们明天见。